Man, it is a windy day in East Tennessee. I'm up in Halls. We're gonna talk on the 5 things that you may or may not know that you should have in your lease for a long-term tenant today. So let's get into it. Let's talk about some things that might surprise you and other things that you're thinking, yeah, I've had that on there. I've had that on my lease before. And honestly, the things that surprise you, don't let it worry you. Don't let it bother you that it's not on your lease right now. We are always editing our lease. Man, you get the craziest tenants and they convince you to put another line item on that lease the next year to make sure that you're covered by that next stupid decision that's being made every single time. When you're creating a lease, I would always start out with, going to an attorney that specializes in real estate, specifically multifamily properties. If you can get to that level, there's going to be a clear person in your town, in your area that you can check with. That's probably your most expensive but best way to go about this. A cheap way, I would just give you a tip, is check in with your local realtor. They will have leases that are provided by the Realtor Association. They cannot let you use them, but they can help you guide with drafting your own personal lease. Once again, if there's no lease at the property, the worst case scenario when you're taking on a property that you're buying, or you've gotten lazy and you haven't had a lease signed in the past year, it's just assumed that it's a month-to-month lease in the state of Tennessee. So nothing too crazy when there isn't any documentation, but it's always best to have it. If you don't have a playbook and the rule book between you and the tenant, you're pretty much going to be arguing on common law, and it's going to be up to a judge on more of a inside of a civil court that will dictate who owes who. But having a lease, showing someone that they breached it, they signed it, they agreed to it, that brings a level of confidence that you can be safe. And it might even help in a situation where the insurance company needs to do repairs and you have to provide a lease. Otherwise, they're gonna probably look at you and say, well, that's not a tenant. You just had someone in your house, they burned it down. It could create a very extreme situation where you're out of luck. So again, let's jump into the 5 things that you need to have on your lease. And let me tell you, there's gonna be a lot more. So these are just 5. Comment down below if I missed anything, because I know I did. And we have more than just 5 things on our lease, so. But these are the ones that if you don't have, they might get you in sticky situations down the road. So number 1 is like damage to the property. You need to make sure that on the lease you have some type of statement that says only human byproduct or like human waste, throw up, poop, pee, things we don't like to say on YouTube videos, can go down the toilet, and toilet paper, but no wet wipes, no female products, nothing abnormal down the drains of any sink, toilet, or any type of plumbing at the property. And say something that it's not limited to those specific items. We only allow human waste and toilet paper down drains. That will allow you to be able to breach a lease if a tenant breaks that rule, and get out of the situation faster if you have someone damaging the property. Number 2, this is a big one. It's when does the tenant allow you into the property? Tennessee state law, as far as I know, you basically can give a 24-hour notice, and if you believe there's a maintenance item that needs to be handled at the property, you can physically go in. However, having that on the lease, just stating, hey, we can access the property with a 24-hour notice for any reason, allows you to have a wider ability to get into the house, so you can check, whether it be a wellness check on the property, the tenant, or actually solving a maintenance problem. It allows you to get inside the house without having to get approval if you're in a situation where you're kind of past the whole customer experience with your tenant and you're dealing with, them locking up and trying to not communicate with you. This gives you ability to get into the property and solve the things you need to solve. However, if there are legitimate maintenance problems, giving a 24-hour notice will allow you to do that by default. Then third thing is, when is rent late? So you need to define what the late fee is and when it will be charged. And in the state of Tennessee, you need to look up those specifics. To be safe, I have it on the 6th and the 8th. I have probably another video on here going over why I split up my late fees. Gives me a little bit more negotiation tactics to be able to warn people and have better communication and an excuse to have that communication between the two late fees to see what their plans are. For you, you just need to know that to tell the tenant when they move in, hey, this is your late fee. This is when it's gonna hit if you do not make payment. Why I bring this up is a lot of people try to talk, tenants specifically, try to act like they don't know the rules. So it's important to go over the rules before they move in. You as a landlord cannot charge more than 10% of outstanding balance. So if you have like a standard late fee of $300, you could be breaking the law depending on how much is due. So that is why you need to keep an accurate lease ledger, because notice how I said 10% of outstanding balance, not 10% of rent. So if they're behind 2 months rent, you can charge 10% of all of the money due previous, which means more money for you if the collections agency, assuming you lose that tenant, they move out, that they can go and try to recuperate for you in the future, garnishing wages and other tactics that they will handle for you on your behalf. And number 4, pet policy. From my understanding, the state of Tennessee does not have any specifics or boundaries of what you can enforce with a fee. So right now, again, from my understanding, and please look it up and check with your local attorney, but you can charge a fee for a pet that was not supposed to be at the property or approved by management or landlord. I make it really clear to people if they're gonna sneak a pet in, it's gonna get really expensive really quickly. I mean, I think our lease, I'd have to double check because we haven't had a circumstance where someone sneaks a pet in for very long without having it found, because we do our move-in inspections, and at that time we usually find the animal crate or some dog food. In our application process, the AI bot can track any pet expenses on their bank statement, which we make them upload to our application process. So our accidental pets being found, they don't happen very often between our application process and our move-in process being at the property. But let's say, 6 months in, they sneak a cat or a dog and you do not have on the lease the pet policy, you are going to be pretty much out of luck, because it's seen as normal for people to have animals. And if you don't have a policy, it's not the customer, tenant's fault that you didn't charge an application fee for the pet, you didn't screen the animal, and you just let them assume to adopt a dog or cat. So again, it's important to, first off, state what it costs to have a pet. Secondly, how to go about getting it approved through you as the landlord. And then third, what are the consequences if a pet is found at the property? And is there a daily rate? Is there a one-time major fee of $1,000? These are things that you can come up with, because like I said, when I looked into the law, it was difficult to find any limitations of what I could do, which is actually a good thing, because it means there's more room to play with higher consequences. Compared to a late fee, I cannot go past that 10% of outstanding balance. And number 5, this is the one that's gonna save you time as you scale to make sure that's in your lease. It is making sure that there's a policy of how rent is paid. You think when you first buy your first rental, it's not that big of a deal. They'll just sign a check, or they'll mail it, or I'll come pick it up, or they pay online. But making it clear from the beginning how the rent is paid is so important to scaling. I've talked to small landlords that own 5. I know a lady off my head right now that she had to go to the properties to pick up the rent because these tenants were taking advantage of her so much that she, as a person that was trying to provide good customer service, was driving around every month. And obviously the tenants weren't always there. They didn't always have the money, and it turned into a non-scalable activity. And that's going to be a new term I use a lot, because property managers and landlords need to always focus on their time and be able to buy it back, because you as a landlord, you need to either be going and making money to buy more of these, or going and finding deals deals off market that will get you equity today instead of playing defense, just managing your properties. That is burning so much time up. So again, I would always suggest no checks because they take a while to bounce. So you're gonna find out in like 2 weeks from your bank that the check bounced if the tenant wrote a bad check, and it's gonna cost you money because it's a banking fee probably at your bank. So cashier's checks, money orders, get a PO box because no landlord should have their tenants know where they live. You are officially a celebrity and you need to treat yourself as though you need to have privacy. Do not have tenants know where you live. You will regret it and you will feel unsafe eventually as you scale. My privacy as a property manager is really important to me, which is why I never film outside my house and I don't talk on where I specifically live. And just to get back into the point though, rent needs to be paid online. And then if they cannot make a payment online because there are still elderly people that do not use technology as often as we would like, they can mail a money order or a cashier's check to the PO box. And then I still have that method today, and I go and check that rent is late, and that way I know any check in that mailbox is from who paid on time. So any check that I get in that mailbox, you know, cashier's check, money order, I know those people paid on time, and I can go onto my online portal and track and make sure everyone else has late fees and that every other tenant is told there's a late fee if they still plan to mail. So those are the 5 things that I would always recommend to have on a lease. What are your thoughts? Let me know if I missed one that's super, super important down in the comments. Rent is due, but I'll tell you this, the weather's feeling good, I'm feeling frisky, and you should pay rent early for November. See you next time. Boom.